안녕하세요. 미스터한 채널의 미스터 한입니다. 오늘은 스콧 스나이더 KEI 한국경제연구소 소장과 필립 골드버그 전 주한 미국 대사와의 대담을 소개해드리고자 합니다. 원본 영상의 제목은 새로운 대통령이 당선된 대한민국, 과연 이유는 어떻게 될 것인가입니다. 주한 외국 대사로서 약 3년간 한국에 있으면서 한국의 계엄 사태와 대통령 탄핵, 대통령 선거를 지켜본 골드버그 전 대사의 시각을 통해서 현재 한국의 상황이 어떠하고 앞으로 우리가 나아가야 할 길은 어떠한지 깊은 통찰을 얻으셨으면 좋겠습니다. 영상의 출처와 원본 영상 링크는 더보기란을 참고하시기 바랍니다. 우선 사회자인 스콧 스나이더 소장은 전 미 외교협회 미한 정책국장이었으며 미국의 소리 VOA 방송에 패널로 자주 출연하기도 하였습니다. 그리고 필립 골드버그 전 주한 미국 대사는 2022년부터 2025년까지 주한 미국 대사로 재직하였고 그 전에는 필리핀, 볼리비아, 콜롬비아에서도 대사직을 역임한 바 있습니다. 그럼 이제 대담을 보시겠습니다.
Thank you for joining us today, Ambassador Goldberg.
Thanks for the invitation.
And I want to welcome you to Ion, Korea. Of course, you finished your assignment as ambassador to South Korea in January of this year and have had a few months to reflect on that and watch. You actually left in the middle of the movie, I think, because of the declaration of martial law and subsequent impeachment. What is your impression of all the changes that have occurred over the course of the past 6 months since your departure?
In some ways, Scott, I think I got to maybe near the end of the movie because I think that once the impeachment took place, it was pretty clear it would be upheld by the Constitutional Court. And then I think this election was actually preordained, the outcome. The unpopularity of the Yoon administration, even before the declaration of martial law that was then cemented by martial law, was pretty clear. And so Lee Jae-myung's election and now the president of the Republic of Korea was something that I think was pretty clear to most observers. In terms of what has happened since, as I say, it's kind of an outgrowth of everything that took place while I was there. The declaration of martial law, the impeachment on the second attempt. As I say, the Constitutional Court decision to me was going to be apparent. I happened to have dinner the night of Han Duck-soo's impeachment as Prime Minister and acting president, which was a surprise. But then he came back, then he left mostly in a kind of futile attempt to become the candidate from the right. So I kind of had a good feel for what was happening because of being involved during that period. So it doesn't seem that far removed.
So stepping back from the just getting through that process now that it's over, I wonder if you have some observations about the health and weaknesses of Korean democracy, and maybe particularly in a comparative context, given all of your other experience around the world.
I think it showed itself to be very healthy, the democracy of South Korea. 80% turnout, real interest in the outcome of the campaign. As I said, a rejection of the martial law period that was evident during the protests against President Yoon, but also during the election, as shown in the results. So I think the state of democracy is very strong. There are some sort of warning signals out there, though, also. One of them is that now the Democratic Party has a real majority because it now has the presidency in addition to, if not a supermajority, a very strong majority in the assembly. They really control what will happen in South Korea and have the ability to put through their program. That comes at a time when Lee Jae-myung, despite his solid victory, didn't get to the 50% threshold and really received a similar vote to what he got the last time, only he lost by a small percentage to Yoon Suk-yeol. I think that those warning signals are how Lee Jae-myung, and he has said all the right things in his acceptance speech and in the last few days, how he handles the issues of polarization in Korea. He wants to be a unifier, but he doesn't come from a background that is particularly unifying. And so it'll be a real challenge for him.
여기서 주목해야 할 부분은 이재명이 이번 대선에서 당선되긴 했지만 패했던 지난 대선과 비슷한 수준의 표를 받았고 과반수를 넘기지 못했다는 것을 골드버그 대사가 지적한 것입니다. 계엄과 탄핵을 거쳤음에도 이번 대선에서 이재명이 압도적으로 이기지 못했고 그로 인한 정치 양극화 문제를 다루는 것이 쉽지 않을 것임을 시사하고 있습니다.
What do you think that this episode has, what are the lessons for the U.S.-Korea relationship, and what is the impact of the martial law declaration and the entire impeachment process for the relationship?
The declaration of martial law, of course, took place in the last days of the Biden administration. I think there was a great feeling of remorse here in Washington about what had happened. The idea that a leader with whom President Biden had had such a close relationship with, who viewed him as a pillar of democratic practice, had declared martial law. Now we're in a new era. We have two new presidents. First, President Trump, who had already been elected at that time, but had not yet taken office, and with President Lee Jae-myung. And so we'll have a different dynamic. The dynamic, at least for the initial period, will be focused on the tariffs issue. But there are other issues between the two countries that will be in play. And some of them more positive, if you will, about the connection between the two countries, including shipbuilding and the possible Korean participation in a pipeline in Alaska. We'll see how those go. But there'll be a lot of difficulties, and a huge challenge will be for the new president of South Korea to try to restore a more stable relationship with China on the one hand, and yet satisfy an administration in Washington that clearly views Asia policy now as China-focused and in our competition and sometimes confrontation with China.
So what do you think are the greatest dangers in that context for South Korean foreign policy?
Again, how to balance those interests and how it can be done. And I think there are some other examples of countries that have handled it in certain ways. Europe, for a period of time, was trying to balance those two. They've come now back into the American point of view about technology transfers and some of the dangers of of China. But it's going to be a difficult challenge for Lee Jae-myung.
유럽의 사례를 통해서 이제는 미중 균형 외교를 지속하기는 힘들 거라는 것을 지적하고 있죠. 대사가 기술 이전, 즉 테크놀로지 트랜스퍼라는 말을 썼지만 뒤에 나오는 중국이 야기하는 위험성에서 유추할 수 있듯이 사실은 중국으로의 기술 유출을 염두에 두고 한 말이겠죠. 그리고 이재명이 유럽과 같은 노선을 밟는 것이 어려운 도전이 될 수 있다고 언급한 부분은 이재명 대통령이 친중적인 성향이 있다는 것을 암시한 것으로 보입니다.
So underlying that, I'm wondering, it almost feels like even though there is so many accomplishments in the context of revitalizing the relationship in the Biden administration, that somehow we have a crisis of credibility, maybe on both sides. A lot of Koreans are questioning the Trump administration's commitment to Korea, but also the Trump administration seems to be very doubtful about South Korea's new administration. What are the steps that can be taken to really close that credibility gap on both sides?
I don't know if the administration in Washington is willing. One of the changes that has taken place is a different expectation of alliances in the change of the administrations from the Biden to Trump administrations. Less of an emphasis, quite frankly, on bilateral and multilateral alliances. And so I don't know how, unless there's a bit of a change. It's much more transactional now, and when I say transactional, I might even say it's difficult to describe it as such because transactional usually means there are things flowing back and forth in the different directions that are to the benefit of both countries. I think there's a huge expectation in Washington under the Trump administration that most of those issues will be flowing to the benefit of the United States, starting with tariffs and those negotiations. So it's going to be difficult for a change if there is a questioning of confidence between the two countries. I think that President Lee is pragmatic. He'll want to try to satisfy some of those demands, some of those requests from the United States, but only up to a point.
So it sounds like part of what it is that it's not just a Korea problem, it's a global problem, adjusting to the Trump administration, perhaps. But
yeah, it's the same issue that Europe is dealing with.
But I want to ask you about the global rise of Korean influence because it seems like there's a whole list of items that are being marketed these days. You've watched that over the course of the past few years. What do you think accounts for that? What is the secret sauce in Korea that has somehow become one that the rest of the world is interested in acquiring?
Korea is a great success story. It is due largely to the innovation and hard work of the Korean people, the companies that have harnessed some of the great technologies, starting with electronics and now semiconductors, electric vehicles. And it's become kind of cool, the manufacturing of Korea, the not so much semiconductors, although that is the oil of the 21st century. But even with, if you look going from the Hyundai Kia models of old, like the Pony, to what they have now, where they're winning all kinds of design awards. So it has to do with innovation, with the very idea that Korea is an important country for production, and so I think that as I say, it's largely due to that spirit in Korea. There are a lot of warning signs out there too. The demographic cliff, and how do they keep employment going and keep that innovation and hard work when there are going to be fewer people. That's there are some real danger signs out there too.
Well, so one of the challenges, I think, is how to keep that going, even despite the shrinkage of the workforce, et cetera. I don't know if you have any suggestions about how that might be done.
We have some of those same challenges in the U.S., but I don't think any country that I know of has been successful at turning around the fertility rate. And so I don't know that that's I know that the last administration, the Yoon government, tried to even starting to create a government ministry to deal with the population and fertility. But I'm not sure that will be successful. The question is how to distribute the resources that you have. Another issue for the Lee government is going to be, as is the case here, on pensions as the people start to retire, whether there's enough money in the pension system. So those are challenges for any aging, and in the case of Korea, super aging societies.
미국처럼 인구 유입이 많은 나라도 노동력 감소 문제를 겪고 있다는 것이 놀랍습니다. 그리고 골드버그 전 대사는 지금까지 출산율 반등을 이룬 국가는 하나도 없었다고 언급하였습니다. 그만큼 한번 줄어들기 시작한 출산율을 올리는 것이 얼마나 어려운지 알 수 있는 대목이고요. 윤석열 정부 당시에 신설하려고 했었던 인구전략기획부를 골드버그 대사가 언급하였습니다.
So, on the subject of global Korea, you probably have some very interesting insights based on what you've heard from other places where you have served. I'm wondering what the rise of Korea might look like in terms of what you hear from other places where you have strong relationships around the world.
I think Korea is admired for what they've done. They're an example of a country that came out of a dire situation after the war all the way into the 60s and 70s, real economic challenges, and were able to build an economy and a society that are admired around the world. So I think that is the largest take from other people I talk to. But there are a lot more connections also. There are new areas. For example, in the arms industry, where they're selling a lot more in Europe, the huge deals with Poland and other East European countries. I think it's seen as a leader. I don't know whether it's fully accepted that role, but it is. They're admired and are looked to now.
Turning back to geopolitics, clearly there's a lot of pressure in terms of maintaining alignment with the United States, and Korea also has a lot of economic relationships with China that I'm sure you observed from Seoul. What do you think is likely to be the best strategy for trying to navigate that set of pressures, especially given South Korea's geopolitical positioning as a smaller country that in some ways is executing a foreign policy that is contingent upon or actually limited by the decisions and choices that its neighbors might make?
Korea is very heavily invested in China, as we all are. The key will be to try to separate out some of the high-tech, high-end products that go to China or are produced there from the rest, and whether that's possible, because so much of the Korean investment and interest is in things like semiconductors. Whereas with the rest of us, with the U.S., there are other products that are not necessarily strategic or technologically advanced. Some of those are not even produced in China anymore. They're produced in Vietnam or Malaysia, clothing and shoes and so forth. So I think that's going to be really, and Korea and the companies in Korea have accepted that. I think there's an understanding at Samsung and at SK that they have to start moving down the technology in terms of trade.
삼성과 SK가 무역에 있어서 기술 수준을 조절해 나가야 한다라는 부분은 조금 완곡하게 번역이 됐지만 삼성전자와 SK하이닉스가 중국으로의 반도체 기술 유출을 주의해야 한다는 의미로 해석될 수 있겠습니다.
But those are areas that semiconductors represents, 20% of Korea's exports. So it's a difficult dilemma for any government in Seoul. And that speaks to, in addition to the history of Korean-Chinese relations, why Lee Jae-myung wants to put it on a better course, a less conflictive course. But that's really, I think, the only way forward. One of the other issues at the moment is the reduction of or possible elimination of subsidies for electric vehicles under the CHIPS Act, for semiconductors, and what that will mean for the interests of Samsung and SK especially. Hyundai, I don't know that they'll have much of an option because they've basically been run out of the China market. They're trying to build up India as a counter to that, but they are really all in the American market. And so the tariffs on automobiles is going to be a big challenge.
Let me conclude by turning to the North Korea issue. Obviously, not much was going on in the inter-Korean relationship while you were there in Seoul, but I'm sure that you spent some time watching and thinking about what the world looks like from Kim Jong-un's perspective. And so I'm curious, what do you think actually, how do you think he views the current situation? Trump is back, but he's got his relationship with Putin. What is his course for managing this? Now we've got a new South Korean administration that may want to reach out to him, but we don't know necessarily if he's ready to turn his back again so that he can face a South Korean government. How do you think that all of that is going to play out, and what are the greatest risks and concerns related to how Kim Jong-un looks at the world right now?
Well, I think you're right to say that what will happen will largely depend on his calculation, on Kim Jong-un's calculation. He's doing pretty well, having broken out of isolation, number one, and dependence on China by establishing this relationship with Putin and Russia. He now has some technology coming in for his arms industry. It wasn't lost on many people that the very day that Lee Jae-myung was inaugurated, Sergei Shoigu was in Pyongyang talking about their special relationship. So a lot of this will depend on how Kim Jong-un sees his options at the moment. I think for most of us, we see that there isn't going to be a huge immediate interest in moving forward. Because he's doing pretty well. Eventually, he'll want to complete his cycle of nuclear development and may want to reach out to try to get sanctions relief in return for arms negotiations, not for disarmament, not for denuclearization, which is still the position of the United States and South Korea. So it really depends on that calculation. And I think at the moment there isn't the incentive for him to get involved in negotiations with either. He's renounced reunification as a goal with the South. So that means, what does that mean for dialogue? Why would he want to have dialogue if that's the case? He does want sanctions relief, I'm sure. But that doesn't mean that he's going to go in immediately to try to do that. It's an interesting area of possible cooperation between the United States and South Korea if the two positions and the reasons for going forward are coordinated. Both countries want to deal with the nuclear issue. Especially the United States, but also South Korea. And how that's handled, it'll have a lot of impact on, number one, what happens with South Korea's interest, the public discussion that's taken place on nuclear developments. That's not going to affect us much during the Lee Jae-myung administration, I'm convinced, and he has always been against a nuclear South Korea. And I think that includes any return of tactical nuclear weapons, which was something that Kim Moon-soo, the conservative candidate, had talked about. So again, I think the ball is really in Kim Jong-un's court, and I think he'll want to keep the ball on his side of the court, if I can continue the metaphor, for a while.
네, 지금까지 스콧 스나이더 KEI 소장과 필립 골드버그 전 주한 미국 대사의 대담을 보셨는데요. 앞으로 분석하여 주었으면 하는 해외 유튜브 영상이 있으시면 댓글로 남겨주시면 감사하겠습니다. 내용이 유익하셨다면 좋아요, 구독, 알림 설정 부탁드립니다. 감사합니다.